Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
And there you see it, the drama never ends. I got a tweet this week from a viewer saying, I distinctly remember you saying the Vols would get in trouble with NIL 2 years ago on the show and would be one of the first teams to do so. All I want to know is who you like in the Super Bowl. Well, first of all, I'll take the Niners. Second, though, that wasn't any genius on my part. If I asked any Tennessee fan, name the school that will be at the heart of a knockdown, drag-out, maybe the end of the NCAA-type lawsuit, I think they'd all go, that'll be us. That'll be Tennessee. Surely enough, found out this week, Tennessee in the middle of a humdinger of an NCAA case. We're going to break that down for you in depth today, deeper than you're going to find anywhere else in town. TV, radio, newspaper. We're going to give you background you haven't seen all the way back to the beginning. The NCAA memos, the timeline, all of it. Part of it may be boring, but you're going to walk away with a much better understanding of this case. And we'll break all of that down a little later. But, of course, we also have Tennessee basketball to talk about. Rick Barnes and his trips to Kentucky, those are always fun. So let's get right into this show. First segment brought to you by our friends at Junk Be Gone. The easiest way to clean your home and rid yourself of the mess left behind is Junk Be Gone. JunkBeGone.biz. Check them out this week. We appreciate them for bringing you the show today. And all of our in-show ads are going to be a little shorter today because we need to make up time. So thanks to all of our sponsors for bringing you this relatively in-show commercial-free segment today, or show today. Introducing the first round of panelists, we got two more guys coming up. Chuck Cavaleris right here, Jimmy Himes right here. Former D1 basketball player and former UT assistant coach Mark Pankratz right here. And we've got David Ubben from The Athletic coming up. We've got Ryan Callahan from GoVols 24/7 coming up. So the NCAA stuff, bear with us, we're going to get that covered. Let's do some happy talk first, though. Tennessee goes up to Lexington. They lose at home midweek to South Carolina. Surprisingly good South Carolina team. Volunteers go up to Lexington and win an absolute shootout. The defense, that didn't travel yesterday. And all my talk about winning on the road being impossible in this league, it wasn't for the Vols yesterday. 103-92. And take a look at Rick Barnes and what he's done at his old Kentucky home. We'll just call it that. Tennessee wins at Rupp Arena. He's got 4 of them now. Tennessee had 4 wins at Rupp prior to Barnes. So from 76 until his arrival, they had 4 wins. They've had 4 since 2018. His overall record versus Kentucky is 11-9. He's got a winning percentage of .550. He's over 500 against Kentucky. There aren't many coaches or programs that can say that. UT all-time is probably, they've beaten Kentucky more than anyone, and their all-time winning percentage is 32%. And then Tennessee versus UK's top 10 teams, Rick Barnes, 7-1. Unbelievable the job he does against John Calipari, who highly recommended him for the job. I bet he regrets that. By the way, Calipari last night skipped out on the radio show afterwards. He didn't do the post-game show. He had an assistant come out and do it. So, don't know. Maybe the guy had a stomach bug, but for some reason, he didn't do the post-game show.
It wasn't his fault.
There you go. Mark, takeaways from Tennessee's big win.
Well, you got to start with Josiah Jordan-James. We needed him to play offensively, needed to be aggressive, and he was. But we'll talk a lot about him, but Zakai Ziegler set the tone for me in that game. Mm-hmm. You know, Kentucky won and ruined the Lofton Hall of Fame banner raising last year, and they did that by not sinking on Ziegler's penetration. They were going to make Ziegler finish over the top. And in that game, the first half, Ziegler came to play, finished down low, made some three-pointers, got other guys involved. I think he had 12 assists.
15 is what I saw. 26 points, 15 assists was the number I saw.
Ziegler on both ends of the floor 13. Was the difference maker.
What did you see, 12, 13? 15?
I saw 13 assists.
Everybody's got their own stats. All right, Jimmy, what are your big takeaway?
Well, one of them is that Dalton Connett did not have a big scoring game, and Tennessee scored over 100 points. Yeah. It's only the second time an opponent has scored at least 100 at Kentucky in 76 years.
Wow. The first time Tennessee, right?
Yes.
Right.
And so you had very balanced scoring. You mentioned Ziegler. You mentioned Josiah Jordan-James. They each scored 26. You got double figures from 2 of your other starters in addition to Connett. You had 2 previous games where Connett didn't score a lot against really good teams like Purdue and Kansas, and they lost.
Yeah.
This time he didn't score a lot, and you won. I thought the bounce, the more I watch this team, the higher I see the ceiling. Now, in part, you could say defense didn't travel.
Yeah.
And it didn't to a certain degree, but God, Dillingham made some pretty good shots, didn't he?
Right.
Yeah, he's tough.
Yeah. And obviously
Take away.
Kentucky's plan was what? We're going to stop Connect. We're going to be physical with him. We're going to make the other guys beat us. What happened? The other guys beat you. And you're right about Ziegler. I think first half, he's 5 for 5. 3 of those were 3-pointers. Yeah. And then it was like James gets going. It's like Tennessee put the band back together. You know, and you got your veteran players going.
Well, South Carolina had them slowed down and playing in the mud, as Tennessee put it last year in the tournament. South Carolina slowed them down. They couldn't get much going. But yesterday, they scored over 90 at North Carolina earlier this year and probably might have crossed 100 if Connect doesn't get hurt. Didn't they wind up with 90-plus at Chapel Hill? So you got 90-plus at Chapel Hill. You got over 100 at Lexington. For those of us, meaning me, who've criticized their offense under Rick Barnes, can't really complain this year.
Well, last night, you saw in South Carolina, and maybe give South Carolina some of that credit, but we got stationary with Connect. We're going high ball screen. He's kind of pounding it out a little bit, dribbling a little bit more. All defense is able to see Connect. But last night, there was a lot more movement. The ball screens got flat, meaning the center would come up, but your other wings were down in the corners, which would give Ziegler more penetration. If the help finally came, he was close to the basket to finish, or he could dish it out for the corner 3. And you saw Josiah, you saw Vescovi all make big 3-pointers that led to a lot of scoring.
And I think the edge in the paint was Tennessee 42-30. And that's huge when you're playing Kentucky at Kentucky, right? I mean, they had 3 7-footers. They're going to dominate the paint. Awaka, let's don't forget about him. He came in and had that physical presence. You had that little scuffle. I'd never seen quadruple technical fouls before. I still quite hadn't figured that one out. Every player Barnes sent in did something to help Tennessee win that game. You don't see that very often. If Tennessee can keep getting those kinds of contributions, you're right, Jimmy. They can play with anybody.
Mark, I remember you talking earlier about how James, if he can keep playing at this pace, and then he kind of fell off. The last 7 games, he had 21 points.
Yeah.
And then he gets 26. Now, I don't expect that, but if you can get him to contribute more offensively and make that a more well-rounded offensive team, boy, they're dangerous.
Mark was actually, he asked for it yesterday. He wanted a breakdown of Josiah Jordan James numbers, and I didn't have time to do it because you're going to see all the NCAA stuff we did a little bit later. But it's exactly what you just said. You were preparing to show we need him to do this because here's what the numbers are without him. And last night, I'm kind of glad we didn't do the numbers because it would have been, here's what it was, but never mind. Okay, he did come through.
Well,
he stepped up.
Here's what it comes down to. I think you've seen pretty consistent play from Ziegler, Connect, and even Adu. I know Adu's but I think Adu's had a pretty consistent year. I keep going back to, and Barnes and that culture has done a great job. Who are the other 2 guys going to be? You saw Gainey step up a couple weeks ago at 15 points in the first half. Josiah stepped up. You see Vescovi. So the depth is showing itself, but it's not going to be from those 3 guys that makes us to where we can be a Elite 8 Final Four team. It's can we get those other 3 guys that are out on the floor spacing well enough, shooting the ball well enough, and if they are, now all of a sudden with the Connect and Ziegler attacking the paint and Adu's versatility, it makes us a really high-scoring team.
One of the key plays I liked about Ziegler was his putback after a failed alley-oop, which tells me that just showed a lot about, in my opinion, his basketball IQ.
All right, tell you what, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, how are our views of this Tennessee team changing? Jimmy touched on it. We'll get a little bit more in-depth on that. It's the meat of the schedule. It's the time when you're starting to roll, or hoping you're rolling, going to the NCAA tournament. How are our views changing? How have they evolved since the beginning of the season? What are we right about, wrong about? Tennessee basketball next. Come on back on the Sports Source.